Hi, my name's Zoe, and if you're watching this, it means that I actually did a thing and I uploaded a video to YouTube. I don't really know where to start. If I'm honest, I thought about doing like a bit of an introduction about me and this channel, but I really like conspiracies and mysteries, and I am really inspired by Robert Welsh and Bailey Sarian, who, if you don't know who they are, I'll link their channels below. If you don't know who they are, you should definitely go and check them out. I really enjoy watching them do their makeup and talk about really interesting things. Bailey does true crime, like mystery and murder, and Robert reads ghost stories. So both of those things I'm really interested in, but I'm also interested in conspiracies, hence why I'm doing this own little endeavour of my own. There's quite a lot going on, and I've got a lot of free time on my hands at the minute, and when I say a lot going on, I'm not going to mention what. You probably already know what, and if you're like me, it's a bit triggering talking about it. So let's just get into it. Today we're going to be talking about the death of Marilyn Monroe, and we're also, on top of that, going to be talking about the conspiracies, or some of the conspiracies that surround her death. So if that sounds like something you're interested, then obviously keep watching it. I do have to give you a couple of little triggers before we continue this video today, and I'm going to read them out to you now. So your trigger warnings are death, murder, suicide, drug and alcohol abuse, and physical and verbal abuse. So if those things are quite uncomfortable for you to listen to or talk about, then perhaps this video isn't for you. But hopefully in the future I should be able to provide some fun content that doesn't have any of those triggers, because I want to be as inclusive as possible. So I have a bit of a secret for you. I have already filmed this once today, and I wasn't happy with the way that it went. I wasn't happy with my makeup, and I kept kicking the tripod, which I need to stop doing. And I babbled and I missed quite a lot of key information out, which I really don't want to do again. So this is my second time of recording. I don't know if you can see, you probably can't see, but when I take my makeup off and I put it on again, my eyes have a tendency just out of this eye, never out of this one, just this eye tends to water. So if you see a little bit of makeup coming undone around my eye, I'm well aware of it, and there's not a lot I can do about it. With that being said, let's just get straight into it. So I've got my notes here ready for me, all the dates and when everything happened and went down, so that I can talk about it and get it all right for you. And I'm going to start off by doing my face, I think. So Marilyn Monroe was born on the 1st of June 1926. She was a well-known American actress, model and singer. She was a popular sex symbol for the 1950s and the early 1960s. Everybody has heard of Marilyn Monroe. I feel that you can go into any well-known kind of like home furnishing store. There's quite a few in the UK. I'm not going to name drop them because I'm not sure if I can do that. And you can, if you go into like the canvas section where you kind of get like the artwork that you just already buy instead of buying a frame and putting your own in, there's always one of Marilyn Monroe. There's at least always one. And she's just such an icon. Like, if you consider when she died, she's still an icon to this day. She's still a sex symbol, and we're going to get onto that. Even after her death, she became a huge icon of pop culture. Born and raised in Los Angeles, she spent the majority of her childhood raised in foster homes and an orphanage. When I did my research, I could only find her mother's name, which I haven't included in this. I'm really annoyed at myself. But I couldn't find anything about her father. So I do, that kind of tends to suggest that perhaps her mother didn't know who the father was, or maybe the father wasn't on the scene. But either way, I couldn't find any information about him, so I apologise for that. Her career spiralled after meeting a photographer from the First World Motion Picture Unit, leading to a successful career of pin-up modelling. I'm going to just add a little note in there as well. When I did my research, she got married at the age of 16, and she shortly divorced the guy after that. But I know after that went down and that happened, she then met this photographer who kind of kickstarted her career. This landed her roles with 20th Century Fox, and she starred in minor film roles. A few years later, she starred in several comedies such as Young as You Feel, Monkey Business, and dramas such as Clash by Night and Don't Bother to Knock. So there was a scandal. Basically, she posed for a load of nude photos, and this all leaked out into the media. And I don't know if it's like it is nowadays, but it's true what they say. There's no such thing as bad publicity. I mean, of course there is. It depends who you are, what it is that's being said about you. But it did nothing but it went in her favour. So she was well known, it kind of started the whole being a sex symbol and everything like that. Everybody knew who she was. She was this new blonde bombshell sensation, and there were these naughty photos that got leaked, or that she did the shoot for. Probably didn't get leaked. It's not like it is nowadays where your nudes get out and that's it. I have the horrendous fucking red spots here. I'm so sorry, they're showing up really quite red on camera. I might have had a little pick earlier out of nerves and frustration. It's reported that Monroe struggled with various addictions and mood disorders, but obviously we'll get onto that later. She had 2 marriages, one to a retired baseball star going by the name of John DiMaggio, and then after him she married a guy who was a playwright called Arthur Miller. And both were mentioned in the media quite a lot and both ended in divorce, sadly. Okay, face on. Yes. Monroe sadly died in 1962, aged 36, and the technical term for her death was listed as a probable suicide and death by barbiturates. And you've no idea how many times today I have tried to say the word barbiturates and actually get it right. So I don't sound like I'm saying like barbiturate or something, you know, ridiculous, because it's a word and it's a lot. So the story that we know goes pretty much like this. Monroe's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, was staying overnight at 12305 Fifth Helena Drive in the Brentwood neighbourhood of Los Angeles. And this was on the night of August 4th, 1962. She awoke at 3 a.m. on August the 5th and reportedly sensed that something was wrong. So she's tried to gain access into Monroe's bedroom, but there was no answer when she called her name. She's banging on the door, basically trying to get her attention, and she's not answering back. So immediately she starts to panic. And there were several phone calls placed to, I believe, the police, but I know that she called Marilyn's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson. And that's something to make a note of as well, because I think if it were anybody in this situation, like normally, perhaps not given their... This is where I think that perhaps the housekeeper took Marilyn's history with her mental health and things like that into consideration, because the first thing I would do if I couldn't get into that room is obviously try and get in or break in, or I'd ring emergency services or something like that. But no, she rang Marilyn Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson. So he arrived shortly after, and then obviously wasn't able, like the housekeeper, wasn't able to gain access to her bedroom. So he goes round the side of the property and he gains entry. He manages to break in through her bedroom window. Dr. Ralph Greenson found Marilyn dead. She was lying on her bed nude and she was clutching the receiver of her telephone. There was a little table in the room as well, which I will try and insert a photo somewhere in here. And it was the table that was found to the side of her bed, and it's absolutely it's chocker full of like pill bottles everywhere. Greenson reported that she appeared to be dead. A physician named Engelberg pronounced Monroe dead at around 4:30. So it gets a little bit complicated, because when I was looking into it of like people who were there and people who found, obviously the people that found her and things like that, one website said that Engelberg and Greenson entered the property at the same time. Engelberg was a physician. And then other links and sources that I've used said that it was just Dr. Greenson. The police weren't there at that point in time. So this is just, something to make note of as well, is the fact that 3 o'clock was when the housekeeper awoke and saw the light under her door and was like, okay, something's going on here. Like, Marilyn, are you okay? There's no answer. So that happens at 3 o'clock, and then she's pronounced dead at 4:30. And the reason I say that's weird, and I haven't included it in my notes here because, like a complete and utter dick, I forgot to mention that it was found that when the police arrived at the property, her housekeeper was putting Marilyn's bedsheets into the washing machine. So that's a little bit odd, because she was found dead on her bed, which means they would have potentially, if this is all right, they would have potentially moved her body, taken the bedsheets and put them into the washing machine. Now, any true crime buff, nerd, whatever you want to call it, or to be honest, anybody knows that that's evidence. You can't touch that. You can't tamper with that. It was only mentioned really loosely and in one article I wrote, so how credible and true that is, I don't know, but obviously it's something to consider. And then when you look at the point of when the housekeeper wakes up to the point that Marilyn's pronounced dead, it's an hour and a half. It's quite a long time. Put some bronzer on. The toxicology reports that followed on after stated that she had extremely high levels of chloral hydrate in her bloodstream. So chloral hydrate could be found in like sleeping pills, or potentially she was on I know she was on a barbiturate, which I think she was prescribed at the time, which was called Nembutal. Because of the high levels, they basically ruled out the possibility of an accidental overdose. So I'll explain that a little bit further, because that stumped me at first. obviously the levels being so high and the fact that she, you know, on looking at toxicology and I've forgotten the word for it. What's it called? The bit that they do after. Autopsy. Upon looking at autopsy, they realised that obviously the drugs that she would have taken, it wasn't like an accidental overdose where, say, I'm supposed to take my pills at 6, but I get them confused with 8 o'clock. And I think, no, it's 8 o'clock I'm supposed to take my pills, but I've already taken them at 6, and then I take them again at 8. But if I get poorly, that would be deemed as like a accidental overdose. It's not a suicide. It wasn't intended for me to take those pills in succession of each other and basically double dose. But because she had so much of this chemical in her system, that it would only have been possible for her to have taken them in quick succession of each other, deliberately, thus resulting in technical term of suicide. I think one thing to mention, oh, wow, that's cute. We're going to blend that out a bit better. Where is that big fat brush? So there's a little bit of discrepancy here when it comes to the official police report. So where they basically stated that it was a probable suicide. It wasn't deemed suicide, it was deemed a probable suicide. There was a report that basically authorities had put out, so for the media, for the news, things like that, that the death may have actually indeed been accidental. So there's a little bit of indiscrepancy there. Like, you know, I'm not a police officer and I'm not a detective, but if you've done your research, facts are facts, quote mini car drag race, facts are facts, you know, it is what it is. Guys, this is a suicide. Then that should be what's on the report and that should be what the media then get told. But we see that quite a lot. There can be discrepancies. I think it's down to like the reporters and like how they take the information and, you know, Chinese whispers. Things get twisted up a little bit sometimes. So we can kind of see it from that angle. But it did raise questions and people felt like they didn't actually know what was going on and it was quite confusing. So it's said that quite a few of Marilyn's friends were in shock over her death, which you would be if you found out that your friend had died, you know, unless you were kind of expecting it, say they were ill, and it was like a terminal illness or something like that, you're going to be shocked. But the reason they were shocked is because I think it states that a lot of them, perhaps the picture that they painted of Marilyn in terms of her well-being, her appearance, you know, things like that, her kind of mental attitude were quite far from what was deemed to be the truth. And they felt that the authorities had kind of taken this crime scene and then come up with a story that doesn't necessarily fit what happened. In other words, they were convinced that she'd been murdered. They weren't convinced that she committed suicide. And they had things to say about it. They weren't happy about it at all. It was known obviously in the media and amongst, like, say, her physician, her psychiatrist, maybe other people that were closer to her, her housekeeper, if she had like an assistant or something like that, that she was known for seeing her psychiatrist for a continuous amount of time. She was undergoing therapy and there weren't any kind of breaks in between. She was having therapy. She wasn't in the best place and she was on quite a lot of pharmaceuticals. She'd been known for having like extended pharmaceutical drug binges as well. That was a thing. But her friends' outlook on her life and their kind of views of her well-being, it was different. It was different to kind of how it was perceived in the media. In her room, there was a little table as well that had quite a lot of bottles and things like that. And I don't know, maybe it's just a kind of skeptic in me that when I see that there's a bit of question surrounding, particularly like a celebrity's death, to me, like in my head, that table covered in pill bottles, all the pill bottles around the house could have been gathered up. They could have been anything from like, I don't know, Pepto-Bismol and things like that. They could have all been just kind of chucked on that table and conveniently placed in the room. So you see, you know, as I said, the way her body was found, you know, and then you see this table of drugs, you think, well, she's killed herself because there's all the pills that she did it with. That might not necessarily be the case, especially if this was quite a polished attempt at murdering her. And I don't know what you call it, like a faux suicide, like a hoax suicide, I suppose. That, you know, they could have done that. There was an author by the name of Truman Capote. He basically wrote a letter, and I'm not sure who he wrote this letter to, but he stated that he couldn't, so these are his words, I'm going to read them out word for word. I cannot believe that Marilyn M. is dead. She was such a good-hearted girl, so pure really, and so much on the side of angels. Poor little baby. So many of her friends, they claimed that this official report of like supposed suicide wasn't true, and they were convinced, they were absolutely convinced that it was a cover-up and that she'd indeed been murdered. And I think, like I said, you might have heard quite a lot of the things to do with like the facts and people's speculations when it comes to Marilyn Monroe's death. I don't feel like I'm presenting this to you as like new information and, oh my god, you've never heard of this conspiracy. There might be a few things in this video that you may not have heard of. I didn't hear of them, but I feel that it's no surprise. I think by now a lot of us know that a lot of people speculated that she didn't commit suicide. She didn't take her own life, like she was murdered. A friend by the last name of Bacon recalled seeing her a few days before and said that she seemed to be in tremendous spirits. Now, something that I thought about when I kind of read that piece of information from the source that I got it from, she had a therapist. She was taking drugs for obviously like mental issues and things like that. You know, the girl had a lot going on. We also know that she lived in foster care. She might have had quite a lot of issues surrounding why she ended up in foster care and why she was in an orphanage. She could have been seeing the therapist for that. But one of the things that I kind of wanted to point out and that I kind of felt was worth mentioning is that nowadays, I think, as much as suicide's always a shock, no matter who it is when it happens, it's a shock. It is a shocking thing. It's a shocking way to discover that somebody's died. They've taken their own life. However, I feel like it's kind of more known that people tend to put on quite a front now. And what maybe you would first perceive as behaviour from a suicidal person is probably far from what it actually is. You know, we've seen instances of celebrities that have taken their own life, you know, days before. I'm just going to mention Chester Bennington. A lot of us saw that video of him, you know, he seemed fine. This was literally like the night before he died. He was with I believe his wife and his children, and they were playing a game, and he seemed okay, you know. He didn't seem like somebody who was going to go and take their own life tomorrow. And I feel like, you know, this was the 60s that she died. Perhaps, I don't know if it's to do with education. I suppose, yeah, it's to do with how well educated that people were back then when it came to things like suicide and mental health. If she came across completely fine, which I don't doubt that she did, if what this guy is saying is, you know, solid, she may well have seemed completely within herself, like normal, just going about her day-to-day life as she normally would. But I think what I know now and what some people know now is that there aren't really telltale signs when it comes to somebody feeling suicidal. So that's just something that I wanted to put in there. Another friend who was named Pat Newcomb, so he stated that he saw her the day before that she died. And the two were, you know, talking, catching up and everything. And they'd agreed to go and see a movie together. This was literally the night before she died. And she seemed to be, he said, in his words, he said that she was in perfect physical condition and she was feeling great. There's a comment in there as well, which I feel like I should mention because it does take us on to like the next part, to do with this whole like speculation over her death and everything, is that I don't know whether he said this or whether it was just the general feeling of how she was at the time that she died, that the reason she could have been feeling particularly perky that day and particularly in well spirits is because that she'd recently rekindled an old lost flame with her former husband Joe DiMaggio. He's the retired baseball player. So this is where it gets a little bit more interesting, and we've got some more information for you now about like Marilyn's life and just the whole kind of like moment. So DiMaggio's former relationship with Monroe was described by other people and sources as quite obsessive. He took quite a lot, because obviously she had those like nude photos and everything. I'm guessing that was maybe in her past before she married DiMaggio. She had that kind of reputation about her. And I want to talk about that infamous scene. So you'd have seen it. And going back to those canvases in home furnishing shops where you can find photo canvases of Marilyn Monroe. It's like a bit of a cliche. I know, to me it's cliche, bit of a cliche thing. That scene that was filmed, so it was over a subway grate. And I know at this time she was in a relationship with John. It was said that he got really like offended about it. He wasn't happy about it, you know, and it ended up in a big in a big kind of set to and a disagreement between a couple. You know, you can't be doing that. You need to kind of like rein it in. I don't know what words he used. There's not a lot about it. Reportedly, it ended up in a unpleasant incident between the couple. I don't know what unpleasant incident means. Did they have a physical altercation? I don't know. I feel like by saying that is just speculation, and I wouldn't want to speak ill of anybody that I don't have information about. I don't feel like that part of it is right. But yeah, like they ended up getting into a heavy heated disagreement about it. And I know as well from my notes here that he actually tried to restrict and stop any kind of up and coming film projects that she had, where she would be in scenes where she was like partially clothed or partially nude. He put a stop to it. He was like, no, this isn't, I don't want people seeing you in that way. So a month later, a divorce was filed on the grounds of mental cruelty. So I don't know if that went in Marilyn's favour, or I would assume in Marilyn's favour, just kind of based on the information that we have about DiMaggio and how he was quite vocal about a lot of the things she did. I know that there was tensions in the relationship, and yeah, it wasn't great. I imagine that the two had quite a few issues to work through, but sadly it did in fact end up in them both divorcing. DiMaggio basically decided he was going to go teetotal, he was going to stop drinking, and he started taking up therapy. In the media, he was talked about quite a lot, and he was linked to other kind of like famous women. And I know that People magazine said he hoped that they would get back together. I think that's what he hoped for. And we know that based on a lot of actions and things he said like after that she'd passed away. But anytime these kind of famous women were brought up in any kind of a way and like his involvement with them, he would just straight up deny it. He's like, nope, not true, not true. Following her unsuccessful marriage to Arthur Miller, which was the playwright guy that she married after she separated from John DiMaggio, that didn't go well. That ended up in divorce as well. And she was said to have sought the attention of John DiMaggio pretty much straight after, like sought his comfort and his kind of like company. And DiMaggio didn't actually speak up about Marilyn's death for quite a while. It was his son who stated that DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe actually had a phone call the night that she died. And this is just what was said, so I'm going to read it out for you. His son claimed that DiMaggio spoke with her on the phone on the night of her death and said that she sounded well. And that's all we have. There is nothing else. When I'm kind of going through and talking about everything, because obviously I've done the research, so I kind of know what's coming next. And I don't want to say too much. But obviously it does conflict with other accounts of what other people have said. There was a 20-year order placed from DiMaggio for half a dozen roses to be placed on Marilyn Monroe's grave 3 times a week. So just based on what I read about their relationship, like I know they weren't happy together. There was obviously reasons that they separated. I know it kind of sounds like it was swayed towards Marilyn's divorce, but Marilyn wanting to divorce, but I know that he loved her. Despite the kind of obsessiveness, like he did love her, and I know it hit him pretty hard to not be able to talk about it for quite a long time. Like I'm imagining that the media probably were hounding him quite a bit and things like that, like wanting to get a response out of him, and he didn't want to talk about it. But if what he says is true about speaking to her the night before, then wow, I mean, what the hell. So there was a biography published by a guy called John Postiano, and he spoke quite a lot about DiMaggio. DiMaggio made some pretty bold claims, and he said some things. It sounds like he's trying not to kind of pin blame on anybody. Like he didn't believe that she committed suicide. Fact, like he did not believe that at all. And initially, like he sounds like he's trying to be quite cagey and not really divulge too much information about who he thinks did it. And then I read on and he just straight up came out with it. And this is in his book. This is in this guy's book, this John Postiano's book. It's a biography. I could probably find the title if I tried, but to be honest, it didn't really give me a lot of information. So DiMaggio turned around and he said he always knew who killed Marilyn. I always knew who killed her, but I didn't want to start a revolution in this country. She told me somebody would do her in, but I kept quiet. The whole lot of Kennedys were lady killers, and they always get away with it. They'll be getting away with it 100 years from now. So there's that. And I know there was quite a lot of beef between President JFK and DiMaggio. There were problems. I imagine, I don't know, I'd have to look again, you'd have to dig, but I'm not too sure if this whole like suspected affair between JFK, like a lot of people know about it now and they feel like it's pretty solid and it's pretty true, but I don't know if back then it was something that was talked about in like tabloids and media and things like that. But if it was, I mean, that would probably give DiMaggio like quite a lot of reason to be quite pissy about it, quite angry. But it was a huge claim to make, a big statement to make, and I'm assuming, I'm not too sure, but based on like the dates and everything, I'm assuming that this was something that DiMaggio said after JFK got assassinated. I'm not too sure if he would have been fully comfortable with saying it whilst JFK was still alive. So this is the part that's interesting. So Marilyn died 2 months after the infamous, so it was the 45th birthday party of the president, of JFK. And most of us know about the iconic, you know, the whole sultry, like where she sang for him and everything. She died 2 months after that. Both JFK and his brother are mentioned in, so if you want to look at any kind of conspiracy documentaries surrounding Marilyn Monroe's death, you know, you probably already know just from kind of like people talking about it. Most people know that they're talked about and they're mentioned quite a lot when it comes to the kind of questioning of her death / was it a suicide, was it a murder? They're mentioned a lot. A filmmaker by the name Lippie discovered, this is an Australian guy, it claims to have discovered partially redacted FBI documents that suggest that Robert Kennedy was also said to have had an affair with the American actress. Basically, him and JFK plotted a suicide, so like a hoax suicide. Apparently she'd been known in the past for staging suicides previously, so kind of like saying that she was going to do it and then getting some attention and things like that. She'd had a bit of a reputation for it, so say. The document suggested that essentially she was given the means to do so. Now, I had to sit and think about this because it didn't really give me any more information. I'm not too sure if that means they gave her the barbiturates or maybe they were barbiturates she couldn't get on prescription, and so either one of the Kennedy men had decided that they were going to make that happen for her so that she was more likely to overdose, whether they bullied her. I really don't know, but all I can kind of gauge from that and from what this person's saying is that they were very much responsible, and it's something, for obviously some reason, they wanted her dead. I'm going to do some eyeliner, so we're going to add a little break, and I'm going to do that now. When a pull face is like that, I can't do eyeliner on camera. So this redacted document that this guy claims that he had access to, a lot of people theorise that the document essentially was to shut her up. She had information, and she supposedly didn't just have information on JFK and his brother, she had information about other people. And there's mentions of a little red book, and apparently, well, allegedly, when she had any kind of conversation, like a phone conversation with either, the politician, his brother, or other people, which we'll get on to, she would keep a record of it in this little red book. And a lot of people are worried, a lot of people theorise that these people that were mentioned in this book, they were panicking, and so they needed a way to shut her up. And I don't know, maybe if she'd threatened to talk about it, and instead they realised that silencing her by asking her stop wasn't an option. I don't know. But I'm just going to go on and assume that this was their way, if it's true, this was their way of shutting her up. They didn't feel like she would hold her silence, and their truths would be spoken about, and there'd be multiple scandals. So there's a lot of talk about Monroe potentially being in a little bit of trouble with the mafia, and I'm not too sure why, whether she got a bit in over her head with a few things or whether the mafia involvement, some people speculate that the mafia involvement, sorry, I'm just gluing the lash band on my lashes. Some people speculate that the mafia involvement could have been kind of like Kennedy dragging it all in together and kind of getting these dudes to do a bit of his bidding for him, because obviously he's not going to go and directly do it, although we'll get onto that because this guy seems to think that's a possibility. you know, these guys could have been doing a bit of work for him, with him. Clearly, people didn't want some stuff getting out. There's the obvious, there's the affairs with JFK and things like that. You know, they didn't want a scandal on their hands. They didn't want that kind of information being passed around. So I can not condone is not the word I would use. I can understand why people would think that, you know, he had some involvement in this. So kind of going into a bit of further information with that. So there was this guy who is a renowned wiretapper by the name of Bernard Spindell. And he stated that he bugged her property. Now, I don't know if the police, I'm assuming the police spoke to JFK at some point, but he stated that the night that she died, he was in San Francisco, and claims that, you know, he couldn't have had anything to do with it because he just simply wasn't there. Although, like I've just said, if people are doing his work for him, he absolutely still could have had involvement in it. Just because he wasn't there doesn't mean he wasn't involved. And it's unknown as to whether this, like, so this guy, this Spindell guy, he claims that he bugged out her house. And he overheard, these are his words, he overheard Kennedy and Monroe fighting. Like, I'm guessing like a verbal kind of situation where they're both yelling at each other and things like that. And then he states that he reported hearing a loud bang to what he presumed was the end of Monroe's life, like a blow to the head or something like that. He heard this loud bang. So we don't know whether he passed this information on to authorities or not. It's unknown, but I think is what is quite weird is the fact that reportedly the recordings were seized and they were destroyed in 1966. So does that then mean that JFK had the authorities on side? We don't know. We don't know. It's entirely possible. You know, it would be a bit fishy, wouldn't it, if, you know, this guy actually had these recordings. He then turns them over to the police. He's like, look, guys, this is like evidence. Maybe the mafia, this wiretapper guy, he's got reason to try and screw Kennedy over. And then he's got this information, passes it to the police. I think if the police did receive that, then straight up destroyed those recordings rather than just keeping on to them. You know, it wouldn't hurt to keep on to them for a few years, even if they couldn't prove that it was Kennedy on the recording. It would still be weird for it to be destroyed, if that's true. I'm just going to stick some lashes on quick, and that's really hard for me to do like on camera whilst I'm talking to you and reading, so I will have lashes on. There was a biographer by the name of Darwin Porter, not Dawn Porter, Darwin Porter, and he said that basically she was in over her head. Like, a lot of people would have, like I said, a lot to lose if the information that she had, or she claimed that she had, particularly this like red book when it comes to Kennedy and maybe any other information, like people had a lot to lose. He said that she was, quote unquote, making a lot of dangerous statements and she didn't realise that she was playing with the big boys. So that kind of, I guess they're talking about the whole like the mafia thing and everything like that. For some reason, this lash will not stay where I want it to stay. And it is really infuriating because it's making my eyes go like this. Can you see? It's just sticking up there. I knew I should have worn my magnetic lashes. I knew it. But I couldn't because I wasn't doing a top liner look. Fuck. So this Porter guy, he basically said he believed that mafia hitmen were responsible for her deaths. So I don't think it stated who got these, whether people got these mafia hitmen to do the work, or whether the mafia themselves weren't very happy with her for whatever reason. Like, maybe she had information on them. I don't know. But he theorised and claimed that they used a washcloth drenched in chloroform, which obviously would be quite viable for the whole finding the chlorohydrate in her system. And then they stripped her down and gave her a barbiturate enema, which would then have resulted in the barbiturates in her bloodstream. If you don't know what an enema is, I'm not about to explain it to you because I just don't really think I want to get into that for a first video. If you want an explanation, I'm sure we can put something on the screen here and then you can read it. Okay, so this is our third kind of theory. I've not really been numbering these, but this is like the third theory that I read about. So this is where it gets a little bit tinfoil hat weary, a bit crazy, but just stick with it. And I don't know, maybe you'll find it logical, or maybe you'll just think it's completely and utterly batshit, as I did when I first read it. So Unacknowledged, which is a book by Stephen Greer, he claims that Monroe was murdered by the CIA because she knew the truth about Roswell. I know, pause, shit, I mean really? This is my first conspiracy video. I didn't want to talk about aliens and somehow ended up talking about aliens. I have an alien behind me, right here. I said I did not want my first video to be about aliens because I didn't want people to think I was a tinfoil hat wearer, but apparently we're talking about aliens. He said that she was murdered by the CIA because she knew the truth about Roswell and planned to reveal it all. In the film, he produces what he claims... Unacknowledged is a film, not a book. In the film, he produces what he claims is a CIA memo written 2 days before her death. In this memo, he believes the information refers to the Roswell UFO crash in New Mexico, 1947. JFK is said to have told Monroe that he witnessed evidence of things from outer space at a secret base. I'm just going to put my lipstick on quick because I can't do that on camera. I can't lipstick read and talk. I'm just not that talented. I'm back, and obviously I did a red lip because we're doing a Marilyn Monroe video. How could we not? Let's carry on. So this guy also said, we have a number of smoking gun documents, including a wiretap, not the first time we've heard about a wiretap when it comes to this, a wiretap of Marilyn Monroe the day she died, which has never been declassified. She was threatening to hold a press conference to tell the world about what Jack Kennedy, I'm not quite sure where the Jack part came from. Was he like nicknamed Jack, like JFK? I don't know. Jack Kennedy had told her during pillow talk, having seen debris from an extraterrestrial vehicle at what the document calls a secret airbase, and she was murdered for this. Final theory that I chose to talk about for today's video. Okay, this is like really tinfoil hat weary, so you have to kind of bear with me for this one. So a guy claims that Monroe's death was staged, and her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, had her committed to a mental institution in New Brunswick, Canada, because of a breakdown that she experienced due to threats on her life. This one kind of coincides with other things that we've just talked about, okay? John Alexander Baker, author of Marilyn Monroe, alive in 1984, believes that Monroe stayed at the institution for 20 years without being recognised before being released. According to the book outline, Baker says that he picked up a hitchhiker in Nova Scotia in 1984 who claimed to be Monroe, who was now a homeless, frightened, paranoid schizophrenic. She told him of her days as a former movie star, and Baker was taken by her resemblance to Monroe, as well as the similarity in her singing voice. Baker admits that the woman's mental state would make her story hard to believe for most. I believe 99% that she really was who she claimed to be. And that concludes today's video. Let me know your thoughts of this down below. I'm sorry if it seemed a little bit messy and a little bit chaotic. This is my first time giving it a really good proper go filming for YouTube. I had fun. I enjoyed it. I did have to film it twice. There were technical difficulties and issues. I stumbled upon pretty much every word that I could have, but do you know what? I had fun. And if you're a fellow conspiracy nut like me and you want to see more content like this in the future, I'm going to aim to do at least one video a week for the minute that everything's going on and I'm not at work for reasons that I'm not going to talk about. And please click subscribe. If there's any conspiracy theories that you're a big fan of that you want me to talk about, then feel free to comment them down below. Let me know your thoughts and kind of opinions on all the things that we've talked about today. A couple of them were pretty out there. A couple of them seemed pretty credible. Do you think she killed herself? Do you think she committed suicide? Or do you believe that she was murdered? I have a number of different opinions on some kind of conspiracies to do with people's deaths and suicides and things. We won't get into those today, but I'm going to talk about them at some point. But I personally, I don't know with this one. I'm not sure. I think there could have been a hell of a lot more investigation in terms of evidence and things like that. I do think if it's true, if the crime scene was tampered with, particularly by that the housekeeper of hers, that Eunice lady, I think that's a little bit that's not great and shouldn't have been overlooked. I don't know if I can believe people talking about evidence and things that they've got in documentaries and books if it's since been destroyed or if it's been taken away. I just think, well, you could say that about anything then, couldn't you? You could theorise just about anything. You could theorise that she turned into a fucking alien and went back to her home planet because she wasn't really an actress or a singer, she was an alien. I've got a document that proves that, but it got taken away. You know, you could go on for days talking about things like that. But anyway, it's been fun. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. If you've liked this video, click like, share it, whatever you want to do. And I'll be back soon with some new content. If you've got this far, thank you for watching the whole video. I appreciate it. It's been a lot.